Welcome to the Holy Post. Phil's finally back and he gives an update about his family's harrowing medical emergency. Then new data shows the Democratic Party's grip on black Christians may be slipping. Esau McCaulley shares his take on the reason. Then Nancy French talks with me about the themes in her new memoir, Ghosted, including church sexual abuse, political tribalism, trauma, and her miraculous experiences with God. Also this week, another book ban backfires and defensive driving Florida style. Remember, along with the shows available to everyone, we also have hours of content every week exclusively for HOLYPOST Plus subscribers. We've heard from some of you that you don't have enough time to watch or listen to more HOLYPOST shows, so why should you bother signing up for HOLYPOST Plus? That's a good question, but here's another way to think about it. If you subscribe to Netflix or Disney Plus or any other streaming service, do you really expect to watch everything they produce? Of course not. You pick the stuff you're most interested in. Well, that's how HOLYPOST Plus works as well. We have bonus interviews with guests, live streams, the Skye Pod every Friday, Getting Schooled with Caitlin Chess, not to mention special series and content like Dr. John Walton's How to Read Genesis series. And there's a whole lot more. So don't sign up expecting to engage all of it, but I promise if you do sign up, you'll find a bunch of stuff that you love to watch and engage all the time. And even better, you'll be able to interact with the other amazing Holy Posters in our community and support the creation of more entertaining pro-neighbor Christian content. So go to holypost.com and sign up today.
Hey there, welcome back to the Holy Post Podcast. I'm Phil Vischer. I'm back. I was gone, but now I'm back. Did you notice? Did you notice the change in energy now that I'm back? More Phil-like? Yeah, okay. And I'm here with Skye Jitani. Hi, Skye.
I've noticed, Phil. Very glad you're back.
You filled in admirably, though I didn't really listen. But I feel like it was admirably done.
We had animal news.
Did you?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I listened to part of one, but I was a little distracted. And we also have not Caitlin Chess, not Mike Erie, not Skye's dog. We have Esau McCaulley. Hi, Esau.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And you're still in that place in Oxford?
Yes, I'm still in Oxford.
Yeah, that's the same room you were in last time, wasn't it?
Yeah, same room. Just a slightly different angle in the same room, yes.
Whoa. Well, every time you're on from that room, I want a slightly different angle. Okay.
I'll keep doing it. You keep inviting me back. I'll keep doing it.
And then people at home. Go ahead.
Sorry, are there any rooms in Oxford that are not wood paneled?
No, it's like basically how they did it back in the day.
Yeah, but that room isn't that old, right? Is that an old building that they redid, or did they build something new for that?
I think like 13th, 14th century. Like last week in Oxford time.
Ha, 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 ha. Okay, it's time for the theme song.
What's the news that you like the most? Who's your favorite podcast host? If it's breakfast, get your toast. It's Skye and Phil and the Holy Post. Skye and Phil and the Holy Post.
And sometimes Caitlin.
Taking care of your health isn't always easy, but it should at least be simple. That's why for the last few months, I've been drinking AG1. It's just one scoop mixed in water once a day, and it makes me feel great. That's because each serving of AG1 delivers my daily dose of vitamins, minerals, pre- and probiotics, and more. It's a powerful, healthy habit that's also powerfully simple. I don't know if you've noticed, but in the last few months, I've lost some weight. I've been much more focused on my health, and part of that is establishing good, sustainable habits. One of the problems is I hate taking pills and loads of supplements, and that's one reason I love AG1. I fill my shaker with extra cold water, add 1 scoop of AG1, and I'm ready to go in the morning. And if I'm short on time, I'll just grab a travel pack. Each is an individual serving of AG1 that's easy to mix on the go. So if you're looking to establish good, healthy, simple habits that are sustainable, there's one product I recommend to elevate your health, and it's AG1. Try AG1 and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D3 plus K2 and 5 free AG1 travel packs with your first purchase, exclusively at drinkag1.com/holypost. That's drinkag1.com/holypost. And thanks to AG1 for sponsoring this episode.
Today's episode is sponsored by Sundays. This is Phil. I have a dog. You have a dog. We love our dogs, and we gotta feed them something. Fresh food with human-grade ingredients is a better way to treat our dogs than that old bag of whatever that stuff is. Sawdust and cow bones? I have no idea. But fresh pet food is expensive and inconvenient, and that's where Sundays comes in. No, not the day. The new dog food company that makes air-dried dog food from a short list of human-grade ingredients. It's healthy, with beef, chicken, and digestive aids like pumpkin and ginger. It's convenient. Unlike other fresh dog foods, it's zero prep, zero mess, and zero stress. Sundays is shelf stable and ships right to your door. And it's affordable, costing 40% less than other healthy dog food brands because they don't waste money shipping frozen packages. We've got a special offer for our dog-loving Holy Posters. Get 35% off your first order of Sundays. Go to sundaysfordogs.com/holypost or use the code HOLYPOST at checkout. That's sundaysfordogs.com/holypost. Upgrade your pup to Sundays and feel good about the food you feed your dog. And thanks to Sundays for sponsoring this episode.
So, Phil, what happened? We heard there was a family medical emergency and we didn't get any more details. What happened? Well, let me tell you, this was an interesting couple of weeks. A little dicey, a little touch and go. It'll be 3 weeks ago, I recorded the last podcast that I was on. And the day before that, my wife had abdominal pain, which she thought was kind of like cramps, but different than cramps and a little more toward the side of like childbirth cramps, which seemed really weird because we're not having any more children. And then Monday, we recorded that podcast. And then Monday evening, it was bothering her enough that she said, well, let's go to urgent care and ask their opinion because Blue Cross Blue Shield charges us $75 to go to urgent care, but $600 to go to the ER because they don't want you to go to the ER. They don't like how often people go to the ER, so they send you to urgent care. So we went to urgent care, and urgent care went, you should probably go to the ER. So we went to the ER. They paid our $75 to urgent care, and then went over to pay our $600 at the ER. And ER, well, we waited for 4 hours, like you always do. Lisa was in the ER for 15 hours that night, starting at like 11 p.m. And they did an ultrasound, and they did an MRI, and they said, you have a mass behind your uterus, about 9 centimeters long. And we kind of freaked out a little bit. And they said, we don't think it's a tumor. It's probably more likely there are other things it can be. Could be a ovarian cyst, could be a uterine fibroid. Do you know what a fibroid is, Skye?
Isn't that
heard
a breakfast
that term.
thing?
No, it's not, Skye. No, it's a growth. It's a growth. Yeah, and neither of those are like emergency situations. People have cysts and fibroids fairly commonly, but if they become painful, they have to be removed. So in the ER, at the end of all that, and looking at the scans, they said, we think it's probably a fibroid. You should go home and set up, talk to your doctor about surgery. And which was a problem because right now, Lisa doesn't have a doctor because the woman that was her doctor and her OB-GYN retired. So she started calling. So we came home. She started calling around, trying to schedule herself a surgery to remove a fibroid and wasn't getting anywhere. And while she was doing that, started spiking a temperature. It had been like 100 in the ER. And they said, we don't count that as a temperature, so you don't have a fever. And so we came home, and about 36 hours later, she was still having severe abdomen pain, but now she was also spiking 103-degree temperature. And so my mother used to be a nurse in a previous life. So my mother said, hey, go to the ER. So we went back to the ER. This was Thursday now. Went back to the ER. They said, oh my, and put her in the hospital. And she was in the hospital for 16 days after that because of everything else that happened. So she had a high fever. She had pain. They put her on morphine to handle the pain and then put her on, realized she had some sort of infection, but nobody could find it. Nobody could find the infection. and they didn't know where it was coming from. So they put her on really heavy antibiotics for a few days. And then we had this like revolving door of doctors. We had OB-GYNs, we had general, we had infectious disease doctors coming in. And the big question that they were asking for like 4 days was, are her fevers and the mass in her abdomen related or completely unrelated? Does she have an infection and also a large fibroid, or is whatever's in her abdomen actually causing the infection and the fevers? And this was a critical question because if you need surgery, they don't like to do surgery when you are fighting an infection. It makes it hard to recover from the infection or from the surgery if your immune system is already fighting an infection. So what they wanted to do was get the infection under control and then send her home for a couple of weeks to, and this is the medical terminology, to cool off so that she could have surgery. But the infection wasn't really getting under control. So we still had people saying it could be a cyst, it could be a fibroid, it could be endometriosis, or it could, probably not, but could be a tumor. It doesn't look like a tumor, or maybe it's some combination of the above. In the middle of all this, and none of those would necessarily demand immediate surgery. So they were still leaning towards, we want to get you to a point where we can send you home for a couple of weeks and then you can do surgery outpatient. In the middle of this, one of the infectious disease doctors suggested the theory that it is possible that the mass is an abscess and that in fact is the infection. And so that was now the fifth option. So if that was the case, because here's the deal, the day after she was in the hospital, maybe 2 days after she was in the hospital, they were doing blood cultures and they discovered a specific bacteria in her blood, which is bad. You don't want bacteria in your blood. It means you have sepsis. So when she came back into the ER the second time, she had sepsis, which can lead to septic shock, which has a mortality rate of about 50%. Very, very bad. So she was actually in worse shape than anyone thought by the second time she came into the ER. So they were trying to get that under control. And they had no idea. In fact, they still to this day have no idea where the infection came from that was in her blood. They don't know. They're still debating. So she's now been in the hospital a week. They're still debating whether to do surgery or not. And when was this? This was a week ago, Thursday. Yeah, so the Thursday before last Thursday, her infectious disease doctor came in, the one who had this other theory, came in and said, this was interesting, came in and said, I'm supposed to ask you how you feel about going home. And then he said, but I'm not going to ask you that because I'm not going to let you leave. And she said, thank you. I don't want to go home until they've figured this out. At the same time, we had an OB-GYN surgeon from, this is Northwestern, it's the Northwestern Medical Center system, Northwestern Healthcare System, the big hospitals, one in downtown Chicago at Northwestern University. So we had people from Northwestern in Chicago trying to figure out what was going on. And OB-GYN finally said, I'll be the surgeon. I'll do the surgery whenever we think it's safe. I'm going to pull in, and she wanted to pull in two more surgeons, an oncologist, which is a cancer surgeon, just in case I got in there and it was a tumor and it was a delicate operation. Also wanted to pull in a general surgeon because they couldn't tell from the images, but there was a possibility that whatever the growth was also in her colon, had gone through the wall of her colon. And if that's the case, they'd have to do colon surgery, which is very delicate and can lead to very bad outcomes like colostomy bags, which nobody wants to have one. So they wanted a third surgeon on call in case it went that way. So we're looking at all these possibilities for like a week. And they're still saying, we don't know if we should operate or if we should send you home to cool off. So Thursday, just in case, they scheduled an operation for Friday afternoon. They had the oncology surgeon and the OB-GYN surgeon lined up, so it was on their schedules. So we had that scheduled. Thursday night, Lisa was talking to the OB-GYN surgeon on the phone who said, yeah, it's probably not going to happen tomorrow, but we do have it on the schedule. And she was like, what? What do you mean it's not going to happen tomorrow? That she finally said, we'll come in Friday morning and we will talk about it, and then we'll kind of vote and try to figure out what to do. So this is the day of the surgery. They came in like 7 a.m, said, we're just not comfortable. You know, it could be problematic if we do the surgery, particularly if your colon is involved. And we're like, well, what else are we going to do? So then they went away and they huddled, all the doctors huddled in a big doctor huddle for about a half an hour. And then they came back in and said, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to go into surgery, but we're going to put a scope in and we're going to look around and figure out what are we up against. And then based on what we see, we'll decide whether to proceed, whether it's something we can do laparoscopically, which would make it easy to recover, whether it's something we have to just, open you up for. And so that's what they did. So Thursday afternoon, they took her into surgery. They put a scope in. They noticed that all of her parts were sticking together as one large part. So they noticed with the scope that when they pushed on one part, all the other parts moved also, which should not happen. Should not happen. And they said you're adhered together. And we need to go in. So it was a 4-hour surgery. So here's what they discovered. The infectious disease doctor was entirely right. It wasn't a fibroid. It wasn't endometriosis. It wasn't a tumor. It wasn't an ovarian cyst. It was a massive ball of infection that was spreading throughout her abdomen. So it was the equivalent of hoping you're going to go in and find a little tiny football that you just pull out and you say, all better, all done, and instead finding like a swarm of fire ants the size of a tiny football. And the fire ants are going everywhere. The surgeon, the OB-GYN surgeon, said it was one of the most difficult surgeries she's ever done. It took 4 hours because basically they're just trying to clean out all the fire ants from everywhere. And they were all over. And of course, they're too small to see, so you can't be sure whether you've got everything. So they spent about 3 hours just trying to clean her out. She ended up with an incision that's about a foot long across, halfway between her, starting at her pelvic bone and going up past her belly button, partway towards her breastbone. So she then spent another week in the hospital while they were monitoring, because they said there's a real danger that we didn't get all the infection and that it could come back. And that would be bad because, we just closed you up. So she was on more antibiotics for like 5 more days. And finally, they got her white blood cell count down to normal, which was great. It meant she was no longer fighting an infection. And also got her off IV pain meds that she'd been on for 2 weeks now. And on to oral pain meds so she could come home. So she came home on Saturday. We're recording this on Monday. Yesterday was her first day home. Today's her second day home. She's trying to take a shower right now. I'll go check on her after this to make sure it worked out okay. And we think we're okay. They say it'll be 2 to 3 weeks after surgery before they can say for sure she's out of the woods on any reinfection, which will then be like a 5-week process that all started with, hey, my abdomen kind of hurts. I'll go to urgent care and get an opinion. Crazy, huh?
Crazy. Totally crazy. So did they ever say where they think this infection came from or what kind of infection it was? Or
Yeah, they know what bacteria it was. And it's a bacteria that tends to be in respiratory tracts and also is more common in young kids. So it's possible that she picked up something from, one of our grandkids who are around young kids all the time and are always getting sick.
Yeah.
She'd had some sort of respiratory something for about 3 months, which was common with a lot of people in the last 6 months. So possible that she was coughing so hard that she actually coughed bacteria out of her, like made a little rip in her, trachea, and some bacteria got out that way. Also possible that it could have leaked out of her colon some way. So their official position is they don't know where it came from. They just need to make sure it doesn't come back because it almost killed her. Yep.
Amazing.
Yep.
That's scary.
That's what I've been doing for the last 2.5 weeks and what she's been doing. So
we are really glad that they got to the bottom of it. And it was, I saw Lisa last week at the hospital and she seemed on the mend when I saw her. And I'm glad to hear she's home and that you guys are hopefully heading back towards normalcy, but very scary.
Yeah. So they took out all of her reproductive parts because there's, for one thing, we're completely done reproducing. And that's a solemn vow. And for another thing, it's very easy for them to get infected or, cancerous or who knows what else the older you get. So be gone. So when she came back from surgery, she felt different. She was like, my middle feels happier.
You have a raging infection throughout your abdomen.
Yeah. One of the reasons that they couldn't get a handle on what they were looking at is they said there was so much inflammation in her that the imaging just wasn't clear. Yeah. There's a score, when they do your blood work, there's a score that measures inflammation. And I forget what it's called, but normal is 10. And when she came into the ER, she was at 280, which is higher than normal.
So I'm sure everyone listening to this is grateful for the update and that Lisa's doing well and that you're back. And but to make this a little bit holy posty, other than just a very lengthy medical update.
Yeah.
Some people get squirmish around this stuff. I think it's fascinating. But here's my question, Phil. Can you make us?
Yeah, Esau is something.
The light is blinking, so I don't want to have people for whom that's going to be a thing. I'm going to try to fix that. 1 second.
Okay, so here's my question then, Phil.
Okay.
Can you draw a sermon illustration from any of your experience?
Oh man. I think I need more distance first. I think I need more distance before I start drawing sermon illustrations. Except if you've got a belly full of fire ants, you need divine help.
I'll just say, praise God that she's still alive. I'll be the clergy person amongst us and say, I'm sorry that she had to go through the things that she did, but praise God they eventually figured it out and that the surgery was successful. And that I'm sure that everybody who's listening to this will be praying for her speedy recovery. And for the people who are prayer warriors, so I'm going to sound super Christian now, to pray that the infection doesn't come back. That should be the focus of prayer, that the infection doesn't come back and that she recovers quickly.
Yep.
Yeah. And I mean, I hope people realize if the doctors had voted to send her home when they were debating what to do and should she stay for surgery or not, like that's a life or death decision. Had they sent her home, it could have really, really, really been bad.
Yeah.
So
she couldn't have been home very long without things really running away, because she would have had to switch from the IV antibiotics and painkillers to just oral antibiotics, which they say are about 1/10 as effective as IV antibiotics. So
she was definitely in a precarious place, and
her hero is the infectious disease doctor who just kept saying, "I'm not going to let you leave. I don't care what anyone else says. I'm not going to let you leave." And then the surgeon who just said, that was one of the most difficult surgeries of my entire life. Wow. Okay. Fun. Whee! We scored high on the complexity scale. But she kind of viewed it, because she was there for 16 days, which is a long time to, be in a room in a hospital. She did like the fact that you could just pick up the phone and say, bring me a salad at any time of the night or day. And so it was a little bit like a spiritual retreat at a nice hotel with room service.
Believe it or not, when I was in elementary school, I had a stomach ache at church, and I went to the emergency room and they found an abscess in And they said that if it exploded, like what you said, that I would have died. And so they took me into a surgery immediately. And I had a scar when I was a kid. It ran from the top of my chest all the way down my stomach. But now that I grew, it only covers about half of my stomach. So and I was in the hospital for like a week or two, and I had to actually learn how to walk again. And I almost died. And here's the true story. Here's the true story. I almost died.
Yeah.
And here's the crazy part about it. When it first started, I was faking because I wanted to go home and watch a football game, and my stomach hurt a little bit, but it didn't hurt that bad. So I said, Mom, I gotta, because the 49ers were playing the Dallas Cowboys back when they had like Joe Montana or Steve Young and all. And so I was like, Mom, my stomach hurt, which is true, but it didn't hurt that bad. And my mom said, I'm gonna take you to the emergency room, and if you're faking, you're getting into trouble. So then I got scared, and then I was like, oh, this actually hurts, so I'm not in that much trouble. And then I was like, oh no, this really, really hurts. And then by the time I go to the doctor, I'm in really bad shape. And so I was in surgery within 24 hours because they saw it. And I think it was near my appendix. They took my appendix out while they were in there too. So there's a scar here, and there's a scar going down my chest. So I do know what it's like to go into the hospital with a stomach ache, and then the doctor say, you almost died. Because that happened to me too.
Wow. Okay. See,
and that's not even in How Far to the Promised Land. That's not even in the book. I didn't even
why
make it
is it in the book?
Bonus material.
Does it fit the theme? It's not along the line of your theme of the book?
Well, I almost died a lot of times in the book, and so I thought that if I kept saying I almost died, people wouldn't believe me. But I almost died quite a few times.
It starts to lose its impact after a while. Oh, look at me. I almost died again.
Yeah, look at me. I'm still here.
Look at me. Okay, that's enough about that. So yeah, we would appreciate your prayers that she makes a full recovery and can go back to being a very fun wife and grandmother and mother and voice of Junior Asparagus, even though she's not allowed to be the voice of Junior Asparagus anymore because of big mean corporations. Okay, Florida man.
Is this a Bible? Is there a Bible involved?
Florida man runs over alligator to save his neighbor. Okay, there isn't a Bible involved, but I just loved it anyway. But we're not going to discuss it, okay? We're not going to discuss it because there's no Bible involved. But I just... Okay. Florida resident Walter Rudder was driving home with his wife on Friday evening when he saw a large alligator dragging his friend Rick across the street by his leg.
The fact that he recognized Rick is a good friend. I'd be like, is that Rick? Is that Rick?
Isn't that Rick? Isn't that, honey? Does that look like Rick?
Because I feel like it's possible that, like, if it's not Rick, do you not help? Or it's like, that's Rick, I got to get in there.
Yeah. Oh, no, sorry, that's not Rick.
That's Bob.
So,
don't like Bob.
Quick thinking, he did what any good neighbor would do. He stepped on the gas, drove onto the sidewalk, and ran over the alligator with his car. The alligator then released its grip on Rick and ran back to a nearby pond.
That also takes some aim, doesn't it? I mean, because like the alligator and Rick are pretty close to one another.
Yeah, so Rick was close by. Okay, but we can't discuss that because there's no Bible in it. So instead, we're going to discuss Florida man asks schools to ban the Bible following the state's efforts to remove books. And you've probably heard about people doing stunts like this. A Florida activist known for his tongue-in-cheek petitions to local government agencies has asked school districts in Florida to ban the Bible. In petitions sent to public school superintendents across the state, Chaz Stevens, who was a class clown in middle school, I'm almost positive, asked the districts to immediately remove the Bible from the classroom, library, and any instructional materials. He shared these documents with NPR. Additionally, I also seek the banishment of any book that references the Bible. My objection, he explained in his letter, my objection to the Bible being in your public schools is based on the following 7 points offered for your learned consideration. He proceeded to question whether the Bible is age appropriate, pointing to its casual references to murder, adultery, sexual immorality, and fornication. Do we really want to teach our youth about drunken orgies? He also took issue with many biblical references to rape, bestiality, cannibalism, and infanticide. Then he said, in the end, if Jimmy and Susie are curious about any of the above, they can do what everyone else does. Get a room at the Motel 6 and grab the Gideons. That's how he ended his letter.
Yeah, because when I'm curious about the Bible, my thought is get a hotel room and read the book in the nightstand. That's what everyone does. Hold on, I got back up though.
Funny.
Do Florida public schools have Bibles in them?
In the library. Bibles are in most libraries.
Okay. Fair enough.
Yeah.
I can actually lift this conversation up. Here's something interesting that you might not know. Here's a history fact.
Yeah.
During the abolitionist movement, there was a debate because there was one group of abolitionists. I think it may have been the American Bible Society. I don't remember who it was. It was somebody who wanted to send the Bibles into the South, into the slave quarters. And there were some abolitionists who opposed it. And interestingly enough, Frederick Douglass was on the side of don't just send the Bibles into the slave quarters. Because if the people actually aren't allowed to read, and if it's misinterpreted, then it could do as much harm as good. And so they said, don't send the Bible there unless you're going to send people to help them read it properly. And so the idea was we'll just send the Bible in uninterpreted. And Frederick Douglass actually said the Bible uninterpreted can sometimes do more harm than good.
But Esau.
And so
But Esau, all we really need is just the plain reading of the Bible. The plain reading of the Bible is what God intended.
That's one way of going about it.
in Hebrew and Greek.
Yes. So interestingly enough, there was a debate, and ultimately, I think it didn't go through. That I don't think the Bibles were sent. I don't remember.
So
I don't remember the history.
You're in favor of banning the Bible from grade school?
Oh no! There we go. No. I think I'm in favor of teaching people responsible reading of the Bible.
Yeah,
that's what I'm in favor of, and I think that the Bible read properly sets people free. The Bible read poorly and chains people.
So you believe every public school that has a Bible in the library shall have a chaplain on staff to help students read it?
Well, there's these wonderful things that could also be in the library called books on interpretive method. So I actually think that you should just give them that too. And actually, I do, and I know in a lot of these public schools in Florida, there actually are classes on the Bible as literature. Because that's probably what he's actually trying to get at, not just the Bible in the library, but the Bible as literature. And so I do think it is actually important to, even if you have no religious beliefs at all, to understand this text that has had tremendous influence in American history in ways in which reading it poorly and reading it well has led to human flourishing, and people who misinterpret it have used it for bad stuff. So I do think that it is important to teach people how to read well.
Phil, is this story about a reaction to what the legislature in Florida has done and Governor DeSantis in banning certain topics and books? And so they've tried to flip this around and use the same legislation to ban the Bible. Is that what this is really about?
I'm nodding my head. Yes, it's a stunt, and they've done it in Texas and a few other places in the South where they say,
and does it work?
I've never heard a follow up on. I've heard about it being tried. Like, all right, if you think that's age appropriate, then we're going to take your Bibles away because they're age appropriate too.
I heard another stunt where they were trying to ban the dictionary from these schools because the dictionary included words that were banned under the legislation in other books.
Right. That's a good question. I do not know. Hey, producer Mike, could you follow up on that and let us know for next week whether any of these things have actually helped? All right, I'm going to move on because I preferred the story about the alligator dragging Rick, but there was maybe he had a Bible in his pocket.
I had a bunch of follow-ups. I mean, this is like Daniel in the lion's den instead of I could have gotten to the Bible from that one if you had given me 5 more minutes.
Could have, yeah. But
was Rick okay
in it? Rick has several puncture wounds in his leg, but he's okay.
And was Rick intoxicated when this happened, or was?
You think you have to be intoxicated to get attacked by an alligator, or you just think all Florida men are intoxicated as a general condition?
I just I have this picture of an alligator dragging a limp man.
Who says he was limp?
Maybe he wasn't. I don't know. Like, why does it take an automobile to get out? Go ahead.
I'm wondering how slow this is all taking place. Where you feel like I can drive and run over half of the alligator and not hit Rick.
I think they might teach people in Florida how to do this because my wife's grandmother, who's passed away some years ago, the first time she lived in the Panhandle, Florida. After we were married, I was down there with her, and she was driving her Oldsmobile or whatever it was, and there was an armadillo in the road, and she swerved deliberately to hit this armadillo, and she nailed the thing. And then she gets past it, she hits the brakes, puts it in reverse, and backs over the thing again. And all I heard her say is just, "Oh, I hate those things. I hate those things." And she just she nailed this thing with her tire multiple times. And then
So you think that there's like 3-point turns and animal attacks as a part of the whole Florida driving experience?
Here's my question. If you run over an alligator to save yourself, is that defensive driving? And if you run over it to save someone else, is that offensive driving? Okay. I see I've stumped you on that one. So I'm going to move to the next story. Have the Democrats lost the black church? Are there cracks forming in this long-standing alliance? This is our buddy Ryan Burge looking at the latest research. There's been a lot of talk about how Donald Trump has been picking up more and more of the black vote, particularly black male vote, and that the Republican Party is picking up more African-American males in particular. So Ryan Burge does a deep dive and shows pretty clearly, what we've talked about before, and a lot of people have talked about, that most black Protestants are not as liberal as many white Democrats. They still vote Democrat, but they're not nearly as socially liberal as many white, and actually now are more moderate than the average Democrat. So black Protestants are more moderate than the average Democrat. They're still largely identifying with the Democratic Party and voting for Democratic candidates. But the question is that slipping? And the more the Democratic Party makes things like abortion and, whether it's same-sex marriage or some of the most liberal policies that are coming out of the left wing of the Democratic Party, are they pushing more and more black Protestants away from the party? Hey, Esau, do you have a point of view on that?
Just so everybody know, in the pre-show, he's not just asking me. I said, hey, I kind of wrote a book about some of this stuff, not the political part of it, but I think there's always been a misperception on what black religiosity actually is. And historically, we've been theologically relatively traditional and politically a little bit more progressive, mostly because we've seen two things that have historically been really important to us. Structural racism is a significant felt experience in the black community, as you can imagine. And so when there seems to be racial animus and hostility, that's going to kind of send African Americans running away. And so historically, the Republican Party during the Civil Rights Movement and forward was most hostile to issues related to racial injustice. And so those things like hostility and almost kind of racial indifference has often pushed African Americans into the Democratic Party. But that has not always meant that we have agreed with everything the Democratic Party has done. And so there's always been something of a separation between kind of the extremes of the Democratic Party and what normal black religiosity is. But I think one of the things and I don't know, so let me say this, Ryan, don't chart me to death if you listen to this. So, but I did some questions. I did have some question about it because one of the things that I'm seeing where I am is not necessarily that black Christians are becoming more pro-Trump. I don't see that happening in huge numbers. I think it's it may be something like 88% for who are going to vote Democrat, down from 91 to 94%.
Right.
But I do see a significant number of African American people who've left the church or who are in some sense dissatisfied with the church, who are also questioning the Democratic Party. In other words, I wonder if, shockingly enough, especially amongst a certain kind of post-Christian African American male with kind of who said, what, the Democratic Party hasn't done anything for us. We don't trust Trump, but we know what kind of person he is, and he's the person who, if you make a deal with him, he's someone who can work with. And so I wonder if some of the kind of rise in a certain kind of African American post-Christian male in a kind of certain is somewhat drawn to elements of Trump's kind of hyper masculinity and kind of the strongman part of it. Now, and that's one part. The other part is I do think that African American Christians, they're not enthusiastically, I would say as a whole, I don't see very many of them are enthusiastically saying Trump is a great idea. I think there's significant numbers of us who are increasingly uncomfortable with the ways in which the core parts of the campaign that's being run in 2024. And so I think that you probably will see continued criticism, maybe of some of the stuff that Republicans are doing, but I don't think that you're going to see the same full-throated. I don't think you ever saw full-throated. I just think that there's more of there are no easy or good solutions that are gonna be comfortable for us.
Well, do you think? Because I've seen this because I've made some videos about race and spoken out about things on social media, which is always a good way to gauge the temperature of the broader culture. Just say something controversial on social media and then see what happens. I have noticed a number of African American responses that I get are from people who are, particularly men, who are more successful and lean more libertarian and have a little more of a sense of the African American in the inner city. They do need to pull themselves up by the bootstraps, and they are being given opportunities that they're not taking advantage of. And so I've bumped into some African American older men in particular that are almost hostile toward what they see. I mean,
there's always been. I think that one of the things that happens, and this is another example of it, is that people don't really understand the various subcultures and the nuances within the Black religious and political world.
Right.
I would say I'm trying not to take you deep into it, but this is what I'll say. Do you know how there's like a certain kind of toxic kind of manosphere, like podcasting world? Mm-hmm. I'm gonna get killed for this, but there's like a Black version of that. Okay. They don't know y'all. They know me. There's a Black version of some of that.
Okay.
There's a Black version of some of that, and it's in those spaces where you're hearing conversations that are more kind of pro-Trumpian. It's more like, it's from what I see that stuff being most public, so is that it's almost like the Democratic Party and the Black church have not done very much for Black people. Mm-hmm. And that we're not the ones who are helping with liberation. We're still oppressed. We've been voting for the Democratic Party for like 50 years or 100 years or whatever, and we're still in the same place. The Democrats are in charge of these major cities, and there's still crime and all these other issues. And so what I want to say is, there is a sense in which African Americans have some legitimate complaints to make around, hey, what has been the return on investment for our long-term commitment to the Democratic Party?
Yeah.
The question of how many of those people are then saying, I'm going to go and be vocally pro-Trump, is probably not as high as you're hearing in the media.
So there's a lot of I think this is true of almost everybody in the country. There's dissatisfaction with one's own party. That doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be an enthusiastic advocate for the other party. But let me ask you this, Esau, and Phil, I don't know if you have a thought on it too, but is part of this, forget race for a minute, forget ethnicity, forget background, is there just a certain percentage of all people that are just drawn to authoritarians? And Trump has that authoritarian, I don't care about the rules, I don't care about history, I don't care about tradition, I don't care about constitution or laws, I'm just going to do what has to be done. And some people are like, yeah, that's what we want.
Well, I think that there is a sense that everybody is corrupt, and some people are pretending like they're not corrupt. Trump isn't pretending like he's not corrupt. Therefore, we know that Trump is going to do whatever it takes to stay in power, and if we're a sufficient voting bloc, then we can get him to do what we want. That's basically the logic that I've heard. And so, yes, there's a certain kind of utilitarianism undergirding it. And I would actually say, if it is kind of the Black church that is, in some sense, holding some of that at bay. Mm-hmm. Right. In other words, that we're saying, there is an ethics of not just ends, like what we get, but there's an ethics of how we get there. The whole point of the civil rights movement, nonviolent resistance, is we don't just want these political ends. The means by which we get them has to also be ethical. And so this idea that as Christians, we have to be concerned with how we do things and not just what we receive is, in some sense, keeping the moderate elements of Black religiosity in place. Mm-hmm. It's almost like you don't want to see what happens if the black church loses its moral voice, because then we're going to be in a worse place than we already are.
Do you, because you, a couple of years ago moved back to a historically African-American congregation. Do you see in that congregation a split between the youngest generation and the older generations, where the youngest generations are becoming more activist, in a way that the older generations wouldn't have?
No, I mean, I want to say the church that I attend it's like a 5 generations, so it's like everybody's there, and so or multi-generation. And I would say all of us are obviously aware of kind of the current election, and we understand the issues at play. And we understand that, I would say that we're between a rock and a hard place as relates to the candidates, and that whoever wins the election, Christians are going to have important work to do. So that there isn't an outcome of the election where we kind of go, oh, so and so won, there's no more ethical or cultural issues for us to battle. It's like a lot of me and my friends have sat down and said, okay, if this person wins, then we got to get ready to deal with these issues. If this person wins, we got to get ready to deal with those issues. And it's almost like we're just waiting to see the shape of the battle. I would say that there's less of, if you, there isn't like a question. I mean, if you want to say something like, if you had a 91 on your exam and you went to an 89 on the exam, you might not actually notice it until you get to like an 85 or an 84.
Right.
So I don't think there's been a significant enough shift in black voting or black political sense to really be felt in kind of gathering of black Christians.
Here's what I'm getting at, because we've had Pastor Charlie Dates on the show a number of times over the years, and in one of our conversations, he talked about leading a group of other African American pastors who wanted to march with the younger generation of activists, in a protest march, and the younger generation said, "No, we don't want you in front of our march. You're yesterday. This is our march." And I'm wondering if you see that where younger African Americans, particularly college educated, at some of the more progressive schools, now look at the black church as more or less irrelevant.
I mean, obviously, that's one of the things I was trying to get at earlier, where the question is, what has the Democratic Party done? It's often linked to, or sometimes coextensive with, what has the black church has done? And there is a sense in which some of the civil rights, some of the movements that happened post 2020, they were explicitly saying, this isn't your parents' civil rights movement. And so one of the things that I have tried to do as a part of my own life and ministry is to say, it's not that we have to repeat everything that was done in the 1960s, but there are certain things ethically that they did that if we lose it, then we're going to be in real danger as a country. And so when I talk about the idea that not that the African American community is a restraining force, the African American church is actually a directive force. We're trying to direct dissatisfaction towards action in a way that is God glorifying. And that's what I want to say is the real issue is. It's not like whether or not, it's not the diagnosis, right? We both, all the generations understand the diagnosis of the issue. It's like, what is the prescription and how do we find the right cure? And one of the prescription that people are saying is, which is fine, right? I don't think they should have unapologetic allegiances to any political party. I have friends who are Democrats. I consider myself an independent, and I've been an independent for, I don't know, the last decade or so. And so I don't think that you should have a political unqualified allegiance. And it's not my job to keep black people voting for any particular party. It is my job to say there's certain issues that I think are important for us to continue to keep before the nation. And that whatever party you're in, it's important for you to be courageous enough to speak about those issues.
Yeah. Okay. Skye, any last thoughts?
I think the whole idea of not being aligned with any party is important for Christians and all too rare, regardless of where you're coming from, whether you've historically originated in the Democratic Party, your community, or the Republican. But that it's so tribal, people can't tolerate that kind of call.
I've always had this dream, and maybe I can pitch it on the HOLYPOST to our millions of listeners.
Esau has a dream.
Well, I've always thought it would be great if we could actually accomplish this idea. You call it Independence Day, where all the Christians actually just on the same day left the parties and we became independent. We said, we want to see your best proposal to win us back. In other words, we're all independent. And if all of the political parties saw, oh my goodness, all of the black people just dropped out of the rolls. Oh, we've lost all of the evangelicals out of the Republican Party. They're just sitting in a bucket called come get us. And then we're going to say, hey, what is your actual proposal? Because oftentimes it does come down to the argument is the other side is so evil, you better stay with us.
Right.
And so I want to say, no. You need to win me. It's like appreciate me. And so I would say that it would be great if Christians were seen as someone who we have to actually win with policies that are comprehensively or more extensively Christian. And so I do think that I would love it if we did that. But so if somebody wants to organize that, make it happen in the comments.
Yeah. Okay. We'll get to work on that. Hey, everybody.
Yeah, get on that.
Keep my wife Lisa in your prayers. Pray for Esau's scars, that they'll just continue shrinking as he grows bigger and bigger, and they'll be invisible. When he's 30 feet tall, he will have no more scars. And go to what's this week on Caitlin? Curiously, Caitlin, what's this week? Do you know what this week is? That's the question?
No, because it came out yesterday, but we're recording this. It'll be tomorrow.
Oh, right. It's not out yet. Okay.
It's
so we
not
don't know
out
what
yet.
it is. So
But it's
keep
great.
listening to Curiously Caitlin. Go check out this week's podcast and sign up and subscribe so that, so she can build her voice as we're helping her. And we have a great interview coming up today. Who is it, Skye?
Nancy French.
Nancy French? David French's
Nancy
wife?
French.
Yeah,
Is she going to
Yes.
give us all the dirt on David?
The tea.
You know,
It's
we
the tea.
should do.
You got to open it up. It's the tea.
The tea.
Yeah, we should do a
tea.
bonus
Okay.
episode where she gives us all that. Actually, I'm going to be with David on Thursday night. We're doing a show, a live event in Nashville. But Nancy's fantastic, and her new memoir called Ghosted, which we talk about, is amazing. I read the whole thing really quickly because it was so good, but it's not at all what I expected, which is, we'll get into that in the conversation.
Was it better or worse than Esau's memoir?
Oh,
Better.
Better. Oh,
I
Esau.
read it. I
You
read
did?
parts of it.
You read Nancy's?
Yes.
Oh,
Parts
It's good.
of it. I can't claim the whole thing.
But yours
Nancy, I'm
was-
going to finish it soon.
yeah. See,
It's
if
really,
Nancy
really good.
Gets Book of the Year. Like,
Yeah, I didn't win any book of the year. So it was
You
just
didn't
on
win
the
any
list of.
book? Oh.
It was one of the best books of 2023, but not the best
that's
book.
all. That's all.
I feel like I'm surrounded by people writing brilliant memoirs. It's like everyone's got this great
Tell your
stuff
story, Skye.
Yeah,
seriously,
come on.
no one will read
Spill it. Spill it,
Skyfall.
Skye.
That's it. That's Skyfall. Like it could be like a
Skyfall.
Bond thing. There we go. That's your
Yeah,
thing.
that's great.
Skyfall.
There we go.
That sounds like I'm in a scandal.
I know. That's what
Okay.
people want to read, Skye. That's why they're not. That's why you don't have one of the best books of 2023, because you're not giving the people what they want. Okay,
There
everybody.
we go.
Thanks for being here. We'll see you next week. Goodbye.
When I was a younger man, I did not know how to handle stress. I tended to bottle it up, and it came out in really negative ways. For me, it manifested with physical heart palpitations. But through that experience, I learned healthy and unhealthy ways of dealing with stress. And one of the better ways is by talking to someone you can trust. Therapy is a safe place to get things off your chest and to figure out a healthy way of dealing with your stress. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire and you'll get matched with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. So learn how to get it off your chest with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/holypost today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/holypost. David French has been a regular feature on the Holy Post for years, but today I'm delighted to have his wife Nancy on the show for the first time. I read her new memoir called Ghosted and was blown away by it. It's powerful, beautiful, painful, and a book I know a lot of Holy Posters will resonate deeply with. For those unfamiliar with Nancy French, she's been a ghostwriter for celebrities and conservative politicians for years. That's where the book's title, Ghosted, comes from, along with the fact that she and David were ghosted by much of their Republican community in 2016 when they refused to support Donald Trump. Some of Nancy's books have been New York Times bestsellers. She's also a journalist who did extensive reporting about the sexual abuse and cover-ups at Kanakuk camps. As you'll hear in the interview, Nancy is incredibly honest and humble. She doesn't pretend to have all the answers, and her book is never preachy. It's just absolutely raw, and I was so encouraged by her authenticity. Here is my conversation with Nancy French.
Nancy French, I'm delighted to have you on the Holy Post. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Skye. This is fun.
I'm used to recording with David in that room, so it's funny seeing you there instead.
I know. I normally remove his Grizzly gear from behind me and replace it at least with some Lakers gear, but today I just didn't have the energy.
Lakers? You're a Lakers fan.
Yes.
I didn't expect that.
Long suffering, yes. Well, I grew up in Kentucky, so you have to choose like your professional team independent of geography because we didn't have any teams. And so in the Magic Johnson-Larry Bird divide, I chose Magic, and I've been suffering ever since. We've had some highlights.
Well, speaking of growing up in Kentucky, your new book is called Ghosted, An American Story. I've heard a number of interviews you've done about this book on MSNBC. I think I listened to Jonah Goldberg's conversation with you, and they're all great. But I know you've done far more than I could have listened to. A lot of the interviews I've heard focus on the latter half of the book and some of the fallout that happened for you and David when you didn't support Donald Trump in your Christian community and the Republican circles you moved in. I want to begin by talking about the first part of the book, which I haven't heard you talk as much about on those kind of mainstream outlets. One of the things that surprised me early in the book was how important charismatic Christianity was to both you and David at some critical points in your lives, and the formative impact that had, and particularly things like healings, prayer, prophecy, premonitions, all that kind of stuff that can kind of weird out people who don't come from those traditions.
Right.
Can you share a little bit about that and why you chose to include that stuff in this book, knowing that it was going to be read by a lot of people outside of those circles?
Yeah. So my goal in writing this book was to create a book that was honest and candid, that would not result in any church inviting me to speak there. Because I never want to do that, right? Because I'm not a theologian. I am hanging on to Christianity by my fingernails. I'm not a theologian at all. But in my life, I've had all these really crazy and interesting experiences that I can't discount. And so, like, for example, I include in the book some dreams that I had that are really untidy and head scratching and frustrating and maddening. And I just have, David was healed of an incurable disease, like that happened. And then we had some prophetic things happen. And so I feel like I don't understand why God made these things happen, but they definitely happened. And I didn't want to I think it's probably not the coolest thing in the world to be like a charismatic Christian. But these things happen to us, and I just wanted to be honest about it. And I wanted to be honest about it in a way so that people who do not understand God, including myself, can sort of read about it and have their curiosity piqued, because these things happened. I'm not sure why, but I wanted to include them. I feel like a lot of people probably have these like flirtations with the spiritual in ways that they don't understand. And I just sort of wanted to give voice to that.
Well, I'm glad you did. One of the things that it reminded me of is years ago, I was in New York City as a part of a small gathering of Christian leaders. We were generally mostly young people at the time. And the first night we were together, our host asked us all to share our stories, our testimonies. And the group around the table came from very divergent Christian backgrounds, all evangelical in some capacity, but very different theologies within that. And we all spent hours and hours over a wonderful meal sharing those stories. And the next morning, our host came together and he said that in listening to everyone's stories, two things stood out to him. One, everyone mentioned a significant season of pain or loss or trauma. And two, everyone mentioned some kind of what we would categorize as a charismatic experience, even those who didn't come from charismatic backgrounds, as being pivotal in our experience of God and calling into ministry or whatever it might be. And so the fact that you didn't bury those stories, though you could have, I just appreciate it, because I think you're right. A lot of people are having those kinds of experiences, but don't know what to do with them. So the fact that you were so open about it is incredible. Related to that, going forward to the kind of MAGA stuff, I know you're well aware that an awful lot of the MAGA movement, especially within Christian circles, relies heavily on those charismatic elements as well. There's people claim prophetic word and visions and all this other sort of stuff, which made it that much more interesting to me that neither you nor David were caught up in the MAGA movement, given the charismatic experiences that you'd had in those formative years. What was it about your experience with charismatic Christianity that perhaps kept you from falling into those traps that other charismatic Christians did when the Trump stuff came down the pike?
I do not have a good answer for this, but I did have two different sort of charismatic experiences. One was catalyzed by the Harvard Law School Christian Fellowship that David was a part of. I did not know him when he was at Harvard, but I met him right after. And those are the people that prayed for him when he had an incurable disease and he was cured. So at that point in my life, I didn't know what a Pentecostal was, except to have contempt for them, obviously. And so I was always told that we should be contemptuous of these people because they're given to emotion and they're not smart and they can't figure things out. They can't read documents. And then I was introduced to these Harvard Law School Christian Fellowship people who, by all accounts, people would trust them to read documents. And so I was like, the Bible's a document. Maybe there's something to the fact that, all of these supernatural things still happen. So that's what sort of piqued my interest on that. And then David was miraculously healed, and he did not have to go through this draconian surgery that was going to remove his colon. And he's still great 28 years later. So that was the first thing. And then the second thing was we went to an Assembly of God church in rural Kentucky. And that was amazing and wonderful and a totally different experience, as you might imagine. And that was a lovely church and everybody was great there. And it was like one of the best church experiences that we had. David and I actually were interim youth pastors. Which is weird, but yeah, we just had a great experience, and all of the people that I knew that were baptized in the Holy Spirit, or for lack of a better phrase, I don't even know the right language. They were just wonderful church, wonderful supportive community. We've had people utter prophetic words over us. I don't know why we didn't get caught up in it, except that after we moved to Philadelphia, we started going to a PCA church, a Reformed church called 10th Pres. And so that sort of took us out of the charismatic vibe and culture, though I still believe all the things I've always believed about the Holy Spirit.
One of the things you disclose really transparently and beautifully in the book is the sexual abuse that you had to experience I think you were 12 years old. And it was a leader in the church. And that catapults you later in life to investigating sexual abuse. You did amazing reporting about the abuse at the Kennecott camps. Do you see a link between the way the evangelical church has had a posture toward abusers and its posture toward authoritarian political leaders like Donald Trump? Is there a link between those things? Because they're both interwoven throughout your book, but I'm curious if you've done enough reflection on your time in those worlds to see some connection between them.
Yeah, I don't exactly know. I'm baffled by it. Skye, as you know, David is a very great, he's someone who can analyze all of these things and probably come up with better conclusions than I can. But in my story, I've just noticed that there was a different posture. So it seems like in 98, when they were opposed to the power of Bill Clinton and the way that he utilized it against Monica Lewinsky and other women, it seems like that would be the same as Trump, so if I could tease it out and say, yes, churches teach us to obey male authority figures or whatever. That wasn't true in the 90s when our male authority figure was Bill Clinton. So I have no idea. I think it's basically people do what they want to do if it benefits them. And if it reflects poorly on their tribe, they're not about that life and they don't like you calling it out. They call you a troublemaker. So I'm not exactly sure.
Late in the book, you have this kind of heart-wrenching, gut-wrenching scene where you call up the pastor who was overseeing the church where you had been abused, because you discovered that he may have known about what this other leader at the church had been doing. And sure enough, he did. And it turns out a lot of people in the community knew that there was this serial sexual abuser in the community that had harmed you as well. And part of what he says in explaining why he didn't do more to intervene was, well, this abuser is doing good work for the gospel. And when you invested Kennecott, you kind of got that same justification that these abusers were doing really good work for the gospel. And then when you interviewed people about, or talked to your colleagues and friends in the Republican Party about Donald Trump, it's, well, but he's going to do good things, or he's going to get the right judges, or he's going to stop some liberal policies that we disagree with. And in all of that, it feels like the mission overrode everything else. the mission of defeating the liberals or the mission of advancing the gospel. And have we kind of bought so much into the missional language in the church that it's actually clouded our moral judgment?
I mean, I think so. I think that's inarguable, except that it's such a devil's deal, like it doesn't actually work. So like you've got Pete Newman at Kanakuk Camps, who's really doing a great job presenting the gospel to people while sodomizing them. I mean, it's not a deal you can make. And then like, for example, at Kanakuk Camps, just to stay on that for a second, people are always like, oh, the theology there is so rich. And, people come and they just come to know Jesus in a new way. And it's like, but they're being taught by people who are okay with lies, deception, rape, cover up, NDAs. I mean, it's so baffling. It's not like you have like a slight I think I believe in infant baptism. I think I believe in a believer's baptism. That's like within the margin of like normal Christianity. If it violates one of the top 10 in terms of the 10 commandments, like thou shalt not lie, usually the theology is suspicious. But yes, that's the deal that they say. They say, oh, these people are so magnanimous and they're so magnetic and they're doing so much for the gospel, but they're not. And it is not a deal that they need to make. And it makes the whole thing very theologically suspicious, which is what was so jarring for me, because everyone who taught me about Christianity was like problematic. Like I sort of came to that when I was on the phone with that gentleman, my pastor, my hometown pastor, whom I love. I called him. I hadn't talked to him in 30 years. And he was out in the field and I could hear the tractor in the background. And I was like, this is Nancy Anderson. It's been a while. Someone told me you knew about this abuse. Did you? And he said, well, Nancy, I did. And it was so dramatic and so candid, and I actually felt compassion for him, weirdly, probably because I'm screwed up in a million different ways. But because he was like, the police were called. They didn't do anything about it. He said, I thought about shooting him. Maybe I should have. And it was like all of the things that he said that he tried to do. It just didn't seem like there was a solution. But one of the solutions would have been not to let him teach me Vacation Bible School. That would have been one easy thing. But yeah, it was so disheartening to talk to that pastor, that preacher, and to realize that all of the people that were in charge of my spiritual state were inadequate in ways that were pretty significant.
When you look back over the last couple of years, the Me Too movement, the Church Too movement, the new conversation we seem to be having about sexual abuse, both in the church and in the culture, what's your posture towards that? Do you feel hopeful, or is it now the trauma's out in the open, but it's not being solved? What's your
I feel that
read on where we are?
Yeah, more of the latter. I've been pretty depressed since like 2015, but I don't have tons of solutions. I just wish that people cared. I feel like if you could just solve the caring part of it, it would solve almost everything. For example, people are always like, well, what do you think Kanakuk Camps should do? What do you think this Baptist should do? Whatever. But it's just, it doesn't matter because people don't actually care. They only care about, like, say, if Harvey Weinstein or Bill Clinton or someone outside their tribe is a rapist. They're all about that. The Catholics, they're all about the Catholics being having a sexual abuse problem, but not Kanakuk Camps or not Baptist, not the deacon, not, Pastor Bill or whatever. And so it's very hard to get people to see outside of their tribal lines, regrettably, which it feels like it shouldn't be.
Well, that's a big theme in your book as well, the tribal lines and this posture that if they're within the tribe, they can do no wrong. And if they're outside the tribe, it seems like they can do no right. Speaking of late in the book, this is page 256, if I can read your own words back to you, which, by the way, I as a writer myself, I just want to tell you are a beautiful writer.
Yay.
And that is not news to you because you've been a ghostwriter, and that's where the title comes from, and you've written best-selling books. But wow, this is a page flipper, and it was fantastic. So let me read your own words back to you.
Okay.
You said, throughout my life, I desperately wanted to identify the good people and the bad people so I could walk more confidently among them, befriending the good ones, avoiding the bad ones. I'd categorize people into tribes according to their political views, their church attendance, and their voting patterns. But this line was fuzzier than I originally believed. Earlier in your career as a ghostwriter, you were doing a lot of political speech writing, essentially, or helping them come up with zingers and Fox News and everything else. And you kind of reveled a degree in labeling people outside the tribe. When you were in that phase of your career, writing those one-liners and the different talking points for conservative pundits, what was exciting or invigorating or fun for you about that labeling and categorizing of people at the time?
So my spiritual gift is sarcasm. This is not listed in 1 Corinthians. I just love to make jokes. I love to speak hyperbolically. There is something unfair and slightly sinister about the idea that you could stigmatize someone instead of talking to them about their dogma or their beliefs. You can just stigmatize them and make them, make people just not listen to them because of that. And so there was something in a very sinister way. There's something very fun about, putting somebody on a skillet and frying them up on a pan with all of, Fox News watchers seeing it, it's fun. It's fun to insult people. It's fun to make clever jokes about issues that you really do care about. But what I was doing was, and this is a confession, this does not reflect well on me, I was disparaging people. I was taking the crazy outliers and I was saying, well, this is how liberals are, my friends. Or, I would say, whatever. Like I was just not being fair. And what I realized, so this is like my own thoughts about myself after I realized that Kanakuk Camps wasn't even telling the truth, which is a huge theological tenet that you should actually do. I also was violating the 10 Commandments because I was disparaging people by bearing false witness against my neighbor. And my liberal neighbor in particular. I don't have any liberal neighbors, not very many. But if I did have a liberal neighbor, I would have, mischaracterized them or, conceivably. And so that's what I did for my pundits is I would make jokes and I would insult people and I would make, gross generalizations based on one, liberal in Topeka. And I realized it just wasn't right. I thought at the time, I'm almost 50. I thought at the time it was reminiscent of Tip O'Neill and Ronald Reagan, the way they used to interact, where Reagan used to insult Tip O'Neill, even his weight. They really went after each other. But after Reagan was shot, Tip O'Neill was the first person in his room praying the 23rd Psalm with him. I thought our political acrimony was sort of like delivered with a wink. And I was winking. I was like, oh, this is fun. This is the way politics is. You sort of have this morality for this is how I act in the with my friends at church, and this is how I act in the car line. And then politics, though, it ain't beanbag. And so I was just, participating in that. And then I was like, wait a minute, there's no like provision in the Bible with an asterisk that says, well, if you want to bear false witness against your neighbor, as long as they're Democrats, that's cool. There wasn't that. And so I had to change.
So maybe I share your spiritual gifting because I feel that. I definitely feel that. And I'm part of an improv theater because I enjoy comedy and I like doing that kind of stuff, but it can certainly backfire and get me in trouble. And there have been a few times where even on this show, some of our listeners have called me out for a zinger or a characterization that was unfair. And so this is why I wanted to bring it up with you as a recovering, sarcastic commentator. How do you avoid making the same error in the opposite direction now that you're on the other side of this and not mischaracterize your Republican, conservative, evangelical MAGA neighbors that it'd be very easy to paint with a broad brush or dismiss? What have you found helpful to keep you from erring on that side? I am not sure that I've done it very well, but and some people have called me out on it. So that's one thing is I know that everyone is listening and trying to keep me honest. But the main thing is that everybody that I know here pretty much is a Trump supporter. Like all my family, it's not like I'm on an island and I don't come in contact with Trump supporters, in my natural habitat. Everybody that I know is. And I just love them, they're my friends or people I hang out with. They're in my small group. They're in my family, I just love them so much. And I really bent over backwards in the book, Skye, because I was
writing slowly and carefully, and I was able to control my impulses there. I think I characterized everyone that I wrote about very well. So now when I'm doing my interviews, that's when I get a little spicy and salty. But I think I've done okay so far.
You've also documented just the way your engagement during those years where you and David were feeling marginalized by your community. You talked about how a lot of, I don't know how many, but progressives, liberals reached out to you, showed empathy. When you shared about your sexual abuse in the Washington Post, you were engaged by people across the political spectrum. And that began to change your perspective on those communities that you previously had written the zingers about.
Right.
Is that continuing? Like, what does your community look like now? Is it a mix? You mentioned having lots of MAGA friends and neighbors and stuff, but is it still populated with people on the other side of the aisle?
It is. Yes. I cannot tell you how little I care about politics. I married David. He's in charge of his thoughts and all of that. Like, I don't think he needs an assist from me. So I just don't care what people think. It makes so little difference to me about like people's political positions. It's so boring, and so I know people want to talk to us about it constantly. So I'm always like, just, mentally changing gears when people start talking about politics. I probably look like a zombie or something, but I just don't care. It's not interesting. It doesn't matter to me what people think. And so once you can take that off, it opens it up because you can talk to them about things that are more important than politics. And I think politics is super important and that we should be engaged, but I just do not have the emotional bandwidth to do it anymore. I'm sort of checking out of it. But I would say that most of my friends now, it's probably just a pretty good mixture.
We mentioned early in the book the abuse you experienced, but there's a lot of other trauma early in your life, from growing up in poverty. The colorful way you describe your extended family on the mountain was just fantastic. But a lot of trauma there as well. Losing your college roommate in a pretty dramatic way. And then some relationships that you were in early on, that it's so much. What counsel do you give people who have those kinds of wounds and scars in their backgrounds as it relates to their faith? How has your experience with God and the development of your faith helped you deal with that stuff that you're carrying from those formative years?
I do not know that I'm carrying this well, but I wanted to include that, Skye, because of the following reason. I was reading an article about Roy Moore's accuser. And she was someone who was abused as a teenager, obviously, and had gone on to have several marriages and divorces. And she was embarrassed by that. So she said, I didn't feel like I could come out and accuse Roy Moore because he's a judge and he's so well respected. And I'm not a respectable person, is basically what she said. And that hurt my heart so much because I also am not a respectable person, not even remotely, even if you squint. And so I felt like what happens is these predators ruin your life. And then they point to the fact that your life is ruined to disparage you and to discredit you. And so because of that statement that she made, I was like, you know what? I am almost 50. I don't care about brand management. I'm not going to try to, become a theologian or speak at churches or try to become a best-selling Christian author. That's not what it is. This is just my story. And my story included a lot of terrible decisions, including romantically, and a million other things. And there's something very beautiful about the fact that God can redeem all of that. And also the fact that you don't have to fix yourself before you can have an important cultural voice. And so I am not fixed. I have not emotionally processed either my abuse, some of my terrible decisions. But in this untidiness, I present myself. And people can listen to the story or not. They can determine if it resonates with them or not. But I just wanted to tell my story without necessarily being preachy, like, and therefore what you should do to your liberal neighbor is to make a casserole or, whatever. I just feel like we just need to deal with each other honestly, interact with each other honestly, candidly, and lovingly. And we have that within our power. Not very many of us can issue change on a policy level. Like, somebody like David, he writes about things, some lawmakers might read it, whatever. I'm not in that category and I don't care about it. I'm happy to cede that to other people who are more informed on those. I'm a 3-time college dropout. So I'm not presenting myself as a political expert either.
Well, you and I are very close in age, I think, because I'm approaching 50. And I don't know if it's the same for everybody, but it does feel like I'm getting to that age where just the idea of brand management or keeping up the appearance, it's so exhausting.
Yeah.
You've been doing it so long, you get to a point where you're like, I don't want to care anymore. I'm just going to be who I am. I'm going to do what I do. I'm going to share what I share. I'm going to tell the story and let people receive it or not receive it. Maybe it's just a matter of time. And you wrote this at a time in your life where you were ready to, and hopefully people receive it well. Before we wrap up, a lot of people are aware that not too long ago you were diagnosed with a significant form of breast cancer. And I've gotten little updates from David here and there, and he shared a little bit on our French Fridays how you're doing. But how are you doing?
I cry every time someone asks me. I'm so sorry, Skye. I'm okay. I played pickleball this morning with my neighbors and I showed them who's boss, both the liberals and the conservatives. I put some holy smack down on those people. No, I love to play pickleball every day. I get up like 3 games a day. So like I'm more active than you would think, which is crazy because I'm experiencing something called the red devil, which is the chemo. It's the most brutal form of chemo. And so it's really awful. And my body is doing things that are shockingly disruptive. But I'm still able to play pickleball every day, pretty much. I've got 1 more infusion, then I have surgery, then I have radiation. So I've got some HE double hockey sticks to look forward to. But I'm okay.
Well, we'll be praying for you and grateful for your willingness to not just write this book, but even do interviews like this in the midst of what you guys are juggling. And that authenticity and transparency, I hope, ministers to other people. And you're a model, not only of being open about the stuff you've been through, but the stuff you're currently going through. And I hope people see the presence of God in that.
Well, I think that the benefit of the book is that I actually believe it. Because one of the themes is that God is in control. And the cancer diagnosis wasn't like if you read the book, it's so filled with such freaking dramatic things that happen. The cancer thing, you'd be like, okay, yeah, of course that would happen. But I believe that God is in control of it. I really believe that I feel very close to God. I feel very loved. I feel very enveloped by care. I don't feel angry at God. I feel like this is just an extenuation of the themes of the book, which is that God has you. And you don't necessarily control the consequences of your actions because you just trust God and he controls that. And there's liberty in that.
That's one of the things I really appreciated about the book. We mentioned all those stories that you share in your early adulthood about really encountering God in some remarkable ways. And you can see how those experiences gave you and David the capacity to endure challenges, whether his deployment to Iraq or losing of friends and community in 2015, 16 and beyond, and now with this cancer diagnosis. But, here's what I really appreciated, Nancy. It's not, God does wonderful things and he's in our life and it's hard, but, here, take the wheel, Jesus, and everything's going to be okay. Like in the midst of these stories you share, you're really honest about how much you struggled and how difficult it was and how you failed at times. And so it's the paradox of both, yes, I believe God is here and I'm still a screw up in the midst of all that felt so not just authentic, but liberating, that I also can trust God is here and also not live that way all the time. And that's just reality.
Yeah. I think there's something about that is that if we can embrace it, because one of the problems, the reason I keep butting my head up against all these Christian institutions over and over and over is that no one can admit that they do stuff wrong.
Right.
And so I wanted to sort of model this because I did so much wrong, especially in my ghostwriting life, in terms of owning the libs and making people drink liberal tears and all that. Like that was what I did. And so I sort of wanted to lead with that. But also, it's not like otherwise I'm this amazing, virtuous person. It's just like, I'm just a person. I trust God. It looks weird sometimes. It looks clumsy sometimes. I make huge mistakes sometimes. But man, how much fun is it that we serve a God who is so much better and bigger and more generous and, than that, that our pettiness is no match for his generosity of spirit. And, he's just so loving, and so I also there's mischief in that. Like, I feel like God is curiously mischievous, like, what the heck? Like, what is he up to? I don't get it. I don't get any of it, but I know that I trust him. I just feel like, and that doesn't mean that I won't die of cancer. It just means that I trust him. And there's such liberty in that. Yeah, I find it very beautiful.
Amen. Amen. And so is the book. Nancy, thank you for being with us. Thank you for writing this book. I can't recommend it enough. Again, it's called Ghosted, An American Story. This was better than I expected it to be, and I expected it to be good.
Aww.
So thank you so much for writing it and for sharing.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on this podcast. This is so fun. I'm going to cede the chair back to David next week, but this was fun.
Well, you're welcome back anytime.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you so much for having me.
The Holy Post podcast is a production of Holy Post Media, produced by Mike Strelo, editing by Seth Gorvet. Help us create more thoughtful Christian media by subscribing to Holy Post Plus at holypost.com/plus. Also, be sure to leave a review on Apple Podcasts so more people can discover thoughtful Christian commentary, plus ukulele and occasional butt news. Visit holypost.com for show notes, news stories, Holy Post merchandise, and much, much more.